Thank you for joining me. I'm Gord Long. A reminder before we begin, do not trade from any of these slides. They are commentary for educational and discussion purposes only. Always consult a professional financial advisor before making any investment decisions. In this month's Under the Lens video, I'd like to give you a heads up in what is about to come from the well-connected political elite in the way of the media's new narrative talking points and political hype. The label is the Great Reset. Every time you hear this, I want you to have a solid perspective in which to digest what you are going to be sold. In this regard, I'd like to cover the subjects outlined here. The Great Reset will be delivered through the media channels by what I will call the Davos crowd. Davos is an annual strategy session held in January in Davos, Switzerland by the World Economic Forum. It is by invitation only. You need to be a country leader, CEO of a major global corporation, or a major recognized media influencer. These are the people who influence and effectively determine global policy. The architect and mouthpiece for the Great Reset is the globalist Klaus Schwab, who is the head and founder of the World Economic Forum. He coordinates setting the agenda for the annual meeting. In preparation for this year's conference, he has recently authored and released 3 books to set the foundation for the Great Reset. The first was The Fourth Industrial Revolution. The second built upon it and was called Shaping the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The third is called COVID-19, The Great Reset. Interestingly, shaping the future of the Fourth Industrial Revolution has already been particularly popular in China, Japan, South Korea, with the South Korean military alone purchasing 16,000 copies, which should tell you something. It sets what is intended to be a consensus global imperative agenda. It works in close cooperation with the United Nations programs of climate change and green policy directive. These UN directives originally stemmed as outcome from the World Economic Forum as consensus policy strategy. The Economic Forum believes, and I quote them, "A sharp economic downturn has already begun, and we could be facing the worst depression since the 1930s. But while this outcome is likely, it is not unavoidable. To achieve a better outcome, the world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions. Every country, from the United States to China, must participate, and every industry from oil and gas to technology must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism." Unquote. The agenda is primarily based around dismantling the current capitalist system in favor of a greater centralized technocratic rule, which, by the way, in my humble opinion, will lead to lower living standards, less fuel consumption, fewer civil liberties, and the accelerated automation of jobs. Another key aspect to the Great Reset, or the Fourth Industrial Revolution, is merging man with machine. And again, I quote Klaus Schwab, "What the Fourth Industrial Revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, digital, and biological identity." That seems to me as good a definition of Big Brother as you are likely to get. Even prior to this January's forum, participants such as the Canadian Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and son, by the way, of the Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, who initially took Canada Socialist, is already talking about it. Many left-leaning politicians already eagerly see the opportunity to advance their even broader socialist agenda. Understand, the United States is the last bastion of capitalism, and it must now urgently be brought into the fold after the failure of the Paris Accord. This is how it is being sold. I take these 3 main components directly from the communiques they have issued. The first would steer the market towards fair outcomes. The second component of a Great Reset would ensure that investments advance shared goals such as equality and sustainability. The third and final priority of a Great Reset agenda is to harness the innovations of the Fourth Industrial Revolution to support the public good, especially by addressing health and social challenges. I have underlined some key words, and I will come back to them in a moment. First, however, let's explore these 3 statements a little further for more clarity. The first, steer the market towards fair outcomes. To this end, they say that government should improve coordination, for example, in tax, regulatory, and fiscal policy. They also say upgrade trade arrangements and create the conditions for a stakeholder economy. They expand on this by saying, at a time of diminishing tax bases and soaring public debt, governments have a powerful incentive to pursue such action. Governments should implement long overdue reforms that promote more equitable outcomes. Depending on the country, they suggest these may include changes to wealth taxes, the withdrawal of fossil fuel subsidies, and new rules governing intellectual property, trade, and competition. This is about taxation. Number 2, ensure investments advance shared goals such as equality and sustainability. Here they argue the large-scale spending programs that many governments are implementing represents a major opportunity for progress. The European Commission, for one, has unveiled plans for a €750 billion recovery fund. The US, China, and Japan also have ambitious economic stimulus plans. Rather than using these funds, as well as investments from private entities and pension funds, to fill cracks in an old system, they suggest we should use them to create a new one that is more resilient, equitable, and sustainable in the long term. This means, for example, building green urban infrastructure, creating incentives for industries to improve their track record on environmental issues, social, and governance metrics. Number 3, harness innovations of the fourth industrial revolution to support the public good, especially health and social challenges. Here they outline, and again I quote their materials, during the COVID-19 crisis, companies, universities, and others have joined forces to develop diagnostics, therapeutics, and possible vaccines, establish testing centers, create mechanisms for tracing infections, and deliver telemedicine. Imagine what could be possible if similar concerted efforts were made in every sector. The COVID-19 crisis is affecting every facet of people's lives in every corner of the world, but tragedy need not be its only legacy. On the contrary, the pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world to create a healthier, more equitable, and more prosperous future. Again, I'm using their words, and I continue to see the word reimagine in many forms nowadays. I mentioned earlier the underlined key words. What do they really imply based on what we just went through? Well, this, steer the market. Well, I thought capitalism was what steered the market. It will no longer steer the market. The second one was advance shared goals. What we're talking about here is a globalist agenda. It was considered conspiratorial talk. Well, that's what this is, a globalist coordinated agenda. And the last one was harness innovations for social challenges. What they're talking about here is a social credit system in some form or shape that has already been implemented in China, and we've previously done videos that were frankly quite alarming. The globalization problem, the globalist challenge is, in my opinion, and what they have to solve, is a lack of global growth, insufficient need for labor, overpopulation, which will become unsupportable, Asian population in markets, and a solution to global debt and imbalances. I have talked about these problems in many of our annual prior thesis papers. The thesis paper 2019 was specifically on a new world order. Prior to that was financial repression in 2012, statism in 2013, and the illusion of growth in 2016. These are all well-identified issues, but the Great Reset is not the solution, in my opinion, to them. Here is the hard reality. The coming era of robotics and artificial intelligence. Machine learning, artificial intelligence, according to the technology review just announced, is a radical new technique which lets artificial intelligence learn with practically no data. This is going to be revolutionary to the artificial intelligence. We already have the complete potential destruction of many sectors that are major employers. For example, truck drivers are the biggest employer in America, and we're now seeing driverless cars, that is from Tesla, which are here and now and are now being built and planned for trucks. It won't replace all drivers, no doubt, but it will certainly put a dent in it and continue to grow. Retail, Walmarts are turning to drones. Custodial services, Sam's Club to deploy robots for cleaners. Restaurants we've seen. Fast foods we've seen. We've recently seen firefighting robots helping extinguish fires. We're seeing robotics and artificial intelligence broad-based in all industries and will only accelerate. That will reduce employment. Where are the people going to be employed? Where are the jobs going to come from? This will also require a Chinese-like social credit system that I mentioned earlier, shown here at the top of the slide. It's coming globally through the Great Reset in some form in each country. The cloning of the Chinese social credit system involves big business, big tech, big medias in the form of corporations and their control, with coordinated government policy. What this is, in reality, is about fundamentally a new world order. Again, we warned of this and laid it out in our 2019 thesis paper, The New World Order. To make the Great Reset work, it will take a massive coordinated media sales job. The question is whether the media is structured sufficiently to allow what I will simply label as the narrative to be foisted on the unsuspecting American people. The simple answer is yes. To do this, the media needs to be homogeneous. The answer to this is consolidation. To that end, we've witnessed almost complete consolidation of the U.S. media structure. The U.S. has now consolidated into central control. We have 6 television network ownerships. We have 3 social media platform ownerships. We have few remaining substantive newspapers, and those are owned by billionaires like Amazon's Jeff Bezos and Mexican tycoon Carlos Slim, who individually own the only newspapers left anybody actually reads, despite terribly fake news. The New York Times by Slim and the Washington Post by Jeff Bezos, and 3 controlled newswires, Reuters, AP, and Bloomberg. That is called consolidation. But not only has it become easier to deliver a sole coordinated message, but additionally, news reporting or the craft of journalism has dramatically changed to match the news employers' needs and requirements. Yesterday's journalism is gone. Gone are the days of Walter Cronkite type reporting. Gone are the days of reporting just the facts for the public to base an informed opinion on. Gone is the news being about who, what, when, why, and how journalism. Today's journalism now teaches advocacy journalism. It reports one side of a story or advocates a position. The narrative is on the side being advocated and the facts that support it, like a defense lawyer who only argues facts that support its client, like a salesman that only has one product to sell versus having a full set of available competitive offerings. Like lawyers, the other side is not told, avoided, or ignored. The sole goal of reporting is to promote and advocate the media's chosen narrative. Indications are it has migrated even further to even now fake news. No reliable and credible sources. For that matter, no sources at all, just opinion. The stories are not even collaborated. And we have circular reporting where one media uses another media's story as the source, and around we go. Additionally, what we are witnessing is unified messaging across media platforms in what is obviously a coordinated approach to the delivery of the narrative. We hear the use of the same talking points, word for word, across various media platforms. We hear the use as what can only be called dog whistle rhetoric. Additionally, we are witnessing rapidly accelerating use of media censorship of news under the claims and rationale of them addressing hate speech or fact-checking or other things. This has led to shadow banning, demonetization, and other methods. We are seeing forced self-censorship through cancel culture, political correctness, and being woke. In my opinion and observations, we have witnessed this all become blatantly obvious in only the last 12 months. The media is now selling narrative. Why? Because this is where the big money is, much bigger than product advertising. To prove this, you just have to follow the money. Segmented audiences deliver revenues if you can deliver what people want to hear. Sports fans, for example, want to hear about their team. They seek it out and tune in to media delivering that content. Today we have political polarization, which is creating segmented audiences. The right or left want to hear the message they are interested in and have little use for the opposing view. If anything, they get angry if they're even exposed to it. Charitable foundations and political parties are now supplying the money. They have become major new forms of unauthorized and untracked campaign finance, and the money is huge. The media is a commodity that can be bought. It is now ready and readily usable as a propaganda machine. The required central role of the media will be to sell the Great Reset, and they're ready to do this financially, organizationally, and structurally. The pieces are all in place. So what can we conclude about the coming reset? To me, it places us on the road to centralized government control, not decentralization, where we should be headed. It is leading us away from the choice and power of the individuals to the control of collectivism. It is leading us away from capitalism and towards socialism, or worse. It is leading us towards statism, totalitarian approaches, and lost freedoms. The U.S. is the last bastion of freedom and capitalism. The U.S. was founded on the ideas of the rights of the individual, that is, the right to own property. Freedom of the individual was the road to economic prosperity. That's what the country was based on. In God we trust, the divine authority. The globalist Great Reset believes this is no longer possible or viable. They believe the world needs centralized global planning and coordination. The state must control property, i.e. the cornerstone of communism. Money supply must be controlled globally. Standard globalization requires taxation, for example, carbon tax and universal basic income. Democracy's purpose is to maintain the masses' belief that they actually have some input, which, frankly, will become less and less. The party apparatus at the country level must be the controller. Religion is only a cult with no meaningful value. These are scary philosophies and beliefs, but they're going to come at you, and they're going to come at you hard with the Great Reset. There's an urgency. COVID-19 has given them the opportunity to advance their agenda, and they're going to make it happen to the best of their ability and the money that they have available to make it happen. As I always remind you in these videos, remember, politicians and central banks will print the money to solve any and all problems until such time as no one will actually take the money or to simply have no value. That day is still in the future, so take advantage of the opportunities as they currently exist. Investing is always easier when you know with relative certainty how the powers to be will react. Your chances of success go up dramatically. The powers to be are now effectively trapped by policies of fiat currencies, unsound money, political polarization, and global policy paralysis. And now they're even laying out, through the Great Reset, their plans and details. This is going to make investing much, much easier. I'd like to take a moment as a reminder, do not trade from any of these slides. They are for educational and discussion purposes only. As negative as these comments often are, there has actually seldom been a better time for investing. However, it requires careful analysis and not following what often has been the traditional true and tried approaches. Do your reading and make sure you have a knowledgeable and well-informed financial advisor. So until we talk again, May 2020 turn out to be an outstanding investment year for you and your family. And I sincerely thank you for listening.